So I would like to introduce you, Yassmine, for painting practice.
Good morning, everyone. It's pretty exciting to be here in Breda. I've been in the Netherlands many times before, but this is my first time in Breda, and it's very nice. I'm actually thinking of doing the same parkour as the same journey as Carlos, and maybe take a sabbatical here and stay forever. So, right. So I'm a producer at Painting Practice. I started the journey doing completely something else. I used to be a lawyer. And then, I don't know, life happened, and here I am now working in technologies and film. And it's a pretty exciting time because of what Carlos just showed before. I mean, there's so much going on, so many new things being invented all the time, which is great, and also scary and frustrating sometimes because you have to continuously play catch up and trying to understand how things work, and also have the money to invest in these things that might be obsolete in a year. So what we do at Painting Practice is, I'm just going to have a reel going on in the background. So we work in film and TV mostly. We do a bit of advertisement. We worked on Black Mirror for the first 3 seasons, which are the best ones. And also on a variety of different projects. And what we concentrate on specifically is everything that's visual, really. So starting from when you have the script, trying to figure out how are you going to realize this script onto the screen and make it visual. We do production design, concept art, 3D modeling, and pre-visualization, right? Which is what I'm supposed to talk about today. I just get like so excited about like everything that sometimes like I steer off. So please, sometimes I just have to remind myself that I'm here to talk about pre-visualization. But right, so well, very briefly, virtual production. You know already probably a bit what it is. What you're doing is that you're having real-time renders of what's happening either on a screen, but using a screen like this one, right, it's the next step. There's ways of doing virtual production that happen outside the shoot. So when you, in particular, so at that point where you get the script, you pretty much know what you want things to look like, and you think, how are we going to shoot it, right, which is the pre-visualization side of it. You can also be doing virtual production there. So it's like a sort of umbrella term, really, to cover all the stages of everything that's done in a non-classic way of filmmaking. So the way it works is that in pre-visualization particularly, which is like what we're trying to push for, is that you get the script once again, you sit down with the different departments, the production designer, the director, if he's willing to and not scared of computers, and the VFX supervisors, if there's VFX in the show or film, and you just try to figure out how you're going to shoot it, right? And this is particularly important on series that were, you know, when we talk about big budget movies, they don't care. Like, they can do all the mistakes they want. Someone's going to pay for it anyway. But when we're talking about series like the ones we see on HBO nowadays, or Amazon, or sort of more sci-fi series as well, where there's like a lot of VFX shots, it's really important to understand how much these shots are going to cost, because VFX is probably one of the most expensive things that you could do in filmmaking. So that at the end you can make the best quality episode you can with the money that you have, right? And this is the big issue, I think, that's happening right now in the filmmaking industry, because shows and series are getting better and better, and people want more and more realistic VFX, and they want more and more aesthetically pleasing series. But the budgets are increasing a bit, but around the same. So it's how do we make the best quality while, you know, being able to afford it. And that's how pre-visualization and virtual production particularly comes into the game, because you can just pretty much build the sets, put animation in it, have cameras inside, and understand exactly how you're going to shoot the scene before any of the set is built, actually. And VFX supervisor, for example, can take it and say, well, if we're going to shoot the scene like this is how much it's going to cost. That's too much, oh my God. So let's change it. Let's go back into this, computer, change it, agree on what the scene is going to look like. And once everything's in place, you just go on set, shoot it, that's it, over, right? Well, ideally. So, because some days the director just shows up and just shoots it as they want. So this is part of the process, really, of getting the ideas from the start and trying to understand, like, from script to directors and notes ideas, the previs and set design, which is what everyone's just throwing their ideas, which is this chaos, right? Because another thing about filmmaking is that when you shoot, this is what I enjoy most, actually, which is like small shoots, because everyone's just there because they love the project and they just want to do their best work, etc. But on massive projects, it's a battle of departments, a battle of egos, a battle of trying to, I want my idea to happen and the other person want their idea to happen. So it's how do we sort of put all of this together, and this is our job, really, try to get all this idea and very objectively just try and understand which one is the best and which one is the best and we can make too. And for this, actually, we have developed our own software, which is called Plan V, which is, you can see at the bottom there. So the other problem that we had is, okay, Unreal Engine is great, but no one really knows how to use it properly. And the only people who know how to use it properly, that started learning it 5-10 years ago, everyone thought they were mad at the time. They were like, what are you doing? This is so weird. Like, just, why are you staying at your computer all day? Try to figure these things out. Just come on set. And now, this, like, 10 people that learned how to do it 10 years ago they disappeared because big budget productions just robbed them, just kidnapped them or something, brought them to like Hollywood or whatever. And so you have artists who are great and they have great technical knowledge, but are sort of trying to understand how to use Unreal. But it's happening at the same time as a production. So they have to be developing assets for the production while learning how to use Unreal. And time is gold in this industry. So it's pretty difficult to sometimes just get this both going at the same time. So what we did is we took Unreal, really, and we've simplified it because we needed to, especially on season 1 of His Dark Material, which is where most of these examples are from. So we just realized we were going into this show. It's an HBO and BBC show. We had to shoot it, and we just had to create some tools to help us figure out how to do it. And the software was part of it, but we had sort of like rig, and we're creating a virtual production camera, which 4 years ago, it wasn't that common at all. It was just starting, really, so start picking up. So we literally just took a headset, a virtual reality headset, broke it down into pieces, attached it to like a camera rig, and we had virtual environments within that you could just move around and look at. And this is how we created some of the pre-visualization for His Dark Material. But there is different parts, once again, to the pre-visualization and virtual production work, right? So it can be the concept design, it can be trying to understand how the sets are going to build, it can be pre and post visualization, and this is how you all come together to the final picture. I think this was a great example of it because you can really see how this was our concept concept art and eventually virtual environment, and how that's completely identical almost to how the final image came onto the shoot. So building this without any of that, I would just like a production designer going in saying, why don't pretty much what the buildings are gonna look like, it's impossible. And it's especially in this case because this quarry, it was just a quarry, an empty quarry. So this city had to be completely built. And there was nothing, so we had to know exactly what needed to be done, and that would have been impossible without pre-visualization and without having some sort of virtual production understanding of the spaces. But before all of this, briefly, how have we used Unreal or visual production in the past pre-visualization? So this is exactly the camera that I was talking to you about, our first version of like a Moses cam or an N cam or whatever. And yeah, it was fun because we were working on this show and it was great. And at the same time, we were doing this research and development, which I think was something that some of our people enjoyed really a lot, because you just get to try new ideas and there's no hard deadline and people waiting for you to deliver assets at 11 in the evening. So yeah, but this is an example of how actually 10 years ago it was used on Black Mirror unpurposefully. So this is a basic level of virtual production. I'm just gonna play the video. I'm gonna explain it before. So what happened on this episode of Black Mirror was there was a script, there was the crew, there was no money. So how do we make this episode happen? And this is when Dan May and Joel Collins, who are both the owners of Painting Practice, came up with this idea: just put them in boxes of screens and we're gonna make concept art, put it on the screens, and this is gonna be the set. So this is actually what happened. I have to say this is a bit, it's a bit explicit part of the episode, but yeah. Right, so I'm gonna cut before the non-explicit part because I don't know who's watching at home. Right, so, but if you can watch the episode and you can see the entire episode. Literally, if you know it, you see it really well. There's not a single set built. It's just screens. And another example of how we used pre-visualization and virtual production on this on Black Mirror. And this once again was a long time ago, so it was really before it even was a thing, right? It was on the San JUNIPERO episode where we have this nightclub scene where the director wanted to sort of understand what the nightclub would look like before we booked it and put everything in place, because once again it cost a lot of money to transform things in like a 70s or 80s or whatever time it is environment. So we sort of did virtual recce's, what we now would call a virtual recce, right? But it was just, you know, people going around pre-visualizing these environments on the computer. Right, and now how it's been evolving, I mean, it's been evolving a lot, especially because a lot of people started to understand it, actually. And they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of this. But you can have Unreal Engine made environments. You can sort of, now you can mix and match, which I think is the best way of moving forward. I think sometimes, especially in pre-visualization, some people are just really hardcore and I just want to do everything in animation. I just want to do everything in storyboard, or I just want to do everything in virtual production. I mean, if you want, but I think the best way to actually understand which of the different styles suits any different scene, right? And understand what's the best way. It has to be quick as well, right? So you have to get the best result, but you also don't have that much time before shoot. By the time you get a script to the time you go into shoot, sometimes it's literally just a few weeks. So you have to sort of try and realize it in a fast-paced environment. Once again, this was the same example of that city that was built. What we can do as well with pre-visualizing sets in virtual production before the shoot is that we can also do things remotely, which was a blessing during COVID, because at the start everyone was just thinking like, how are we going to do this? Everyone, one person is in here, one person is in there. And I was just like, well, we can just all get in the same environment and try and understand things together. And I think this is actually, if anything, COVID has showed the industry that there's actually many better ways to deal with things, and no one has to like take planes twice a week to sort of just sit in a room for 3 hours and fly back. So hooray for the environment. And which this continues in the same sphere, the same as the other page, where it just shows once again that you can do set recce's and visualizations, and you can visualize when you build the sets. And that's another thing. When I made the joke about the environment before, that was actually part of what drove us, making filmmaking more sustainable as well, which I think is more possible with virtual production. Although there is debate on whether you're using too much electricity by sending things to the cloud, but I'm just going to ignore it for now until a study comes up. But so the other interesting thing was that beside the fact that people had to travel less, is that there was less waste when we were making sets, right? Because we were pre-visualizing them entirely. And with virtual production, you can really see what it will look like. And at that point, the set is built. There's very little changes to it, really, unless the production designer didn't wake up in the right mood that day, which happens a lot. And because you pre-visualize exactly the shoot, the other thing that sort of supports the fact that there's no waste is that everything's planned. There's very little reshoots, which otherwise in classical filmmaking is just like everyone just knows that there's going to be reshoots, and you're just trying to figure out which scene is going to be. But because you're pre-visualizing this in advance, it's very rare that things change. There might be some exception. So you don't have to rebuild sets, which is always the problem when reshooting. If you were unlucky and the set was gone, you would just have to make it again, right? And finally here, the Previs and Techvis phase, that's also, as I said, virtual production in pre-visualization is like an umbrella term. So everything that we saw before, the concept phase, the set recce's, etc., is part of it. And then you have the actual original previs, if you'd like, which can be 2D or 3D hybrid animatic. The original previs is storyboards, right? So that's probably what everyone just automatically does. Once they have a script, they just sketch things around and they're like, I want this to look like that, right? But and some directors actually still work like that, but it's not very viable when you have like a cruise of like hundreds of people trying to understand like, oh, how did they draw this? You just had a piece of paper looking around. So what we do most of is actually 3D previs / techvis, which is very basic animation, gray blocks, and just trying to show the basic movement that's supposed to happen. You don't even really give people expression or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's an elevated storyboard, really. So it's in a 3D environment, and you have like characters moving. And thanks to virtual production, you can also start adding things in the background. And and trying to understand, for example, how the digital matte paintings are going to work, like, etc. And then you have the Unreal Engine Previs, which we did. This one we did with the app that we created, Plan V, where you are creating the entire scene in Unreal. You're putting animation in it. That's it. That's the scene. This was a VFX scene as well. So it was really important to understand how much it was going to cost, because it was going to be a big scene with two massive bears fighting. Actually, funny story, we got two people that disagreed on pretty much everything throughout the entire shoot to fight like the bears. And I think that just kind of like calmed everyone down a bit. So we used them as a reference to create this animation for the bear. And we just went with the app and filmed it. So we just completely understood how this shoot was going to happen, how much it was going to cost, if there was anything that needed to be changed, if there was an executive producer that suddenly had looked at his email and said, I know I want to have an opinion on this one thing, right? So this was completely done in Unreal and with the app that we created, Plan V, and virtually. And this is also pre-visualization, right? So that's exactly what I said at the start, which is this umbrella term that covers all of these things. Another example of pre-visualization for his dark materials. So you can see on the left, it's a cut of how we pre-visualized it, and here it's the final episode, so how it was on screen. So all of that is not real. Well, this scene is, but all of this is not real, right? And this is how we pre-visualized it before any of this was built. And this is how the final shot looked like. So you can see how it's really helpful to understand how the set was built. And in this set in particular, because you have limitations with the studio, so only this first sort of part of it was built. The rest is all additional. And on this pre-visualization that we did, you could really, there was layers, right? So you had a layer which was what we actually need to build, and then there was a layer was like VFX, and there was another layer. So you could, throughout the app, really also every department could understand, oh, what am I doing? Right? I'm building this. VFX would understand, I'm doing a digital matte painting for this. The lighting team was understanding, well, I have to put lights here, etc. And this was another example. This is actually more what I would call the traditional way of pre-visualizing, which is the armor retrieval scene. So this was pre-visualized weeks before this was shot, right? And as you can see, it's very basic, blocking off characters and animations. And in this case, in this entire show, actually, once again, I come back to the VFX, but it doesn't have to only be related to VFX, but VFX, I think, is a very big example of it, which is like saving money. So productions tell them, I'm going to do some things on the computer and you need to pay me a tiny bit. And they're like, why would I do that? No, this is scary. I don't understand it. But actually, you save so much more money in the end because we were able to completely understand how many shots of the bear are we going to have? Can we perhaps try and cover part of the bear so that we don't have to like do it completely on this shot and that's going to cost less, etc., etc. So, this bear was like months of work from hundreds of people. So if we could lessen the cost of it, we could afford to actually shoot other things better. We could afford to build other sets. We could afford to, get better coffee for people of the crew. So everyone's a winner. yeah, sad. Okay, it just gets mold apart. But yeah, you have different level of virtual production in pre-visualization, and then on set. So on set, you can still pre-visualize, which I know is sometimes you can't always, but you can sometimes. So you have like the first level, which is like traditional previs. You have on-set visualization of VFX set extensions, and then you have it like in this case. So you have the LED screen, and you can, and as part of what I was saying earlier. So you can have these tools depending from the camera that you use that render in real time the scene. It takes 20 minutes, you get the scene back, you can see it and actually understand if there's things that needs to be changed. So that's part of sort of pre-visualization on set that you can do as well. And then there's the final hybrid level, which I think is what most of the shows are doing right now, apart from The Mandalorian, who just went all in, and why not? I think once again, and I really was happy when Carlos said this, because it's all about trying, making mistakes and learning. If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn anything. And I think if any director had like the perfect movie, would probably be their last, if they're smart. But it's all about sort of understanding and trial and error and trying to improve things, and especially with virtual production and pre-visualization, that's fully part of the process. So some of the other uses of virtual production and pre-visualization in pre-production, once again, it's export passes for concept artists, which is very important because, for example, you have an initial concept art piece, and say you have to imagine a city, so a concept artist will imagine it with the support of the production designer, etc. And then it's built as an environment, and then no one likes it anymore, or it's too expensive to build it like that, so you have to change it. Well, at that point, it's really easy to change, much easier to change it once it's Unreal or when it's in our app, sort of Plan V, and then get a concept artist to just very quickly paint over it, than to restart the process from the start. So it's easier, it's faster. You can help all the different departments sort of plan what they need, and that was super important. And our tool Plan V was specifically for pre-visualization, but we're working right now on other tools that are gonna be helping departments that work on the shoot as well. For example, I think well, before Carlos got in touch, we were gonna do a lighting tool, but they're doing a great one, so why double the work, right? And gripping tools, cameras, etc., so that every department can just literally jump in virtually and understand what everyone's gonna do and have the shoot happen. So some of the roadblocks, pitfalls, and challenges, which sounds like a very small part of this presentation, but it's probably the biggest part of working in this environment, right? First of all, it's keeping up with Unreal, because, well, now it's sort of, the situation has calmed down a bit, but every time I speak to one of the Epic guys, Epic Games guys, I'm just like, is there a new version of Unreal coming out? Like, tell me, because our artists can't sleep at night. They're gonna spend the next year learning it, and then they're gonna wake up one day and there's a new version of Unreal, and then it sort of starts again, the process. But that was the initial sort of issue that I also discussed, which is sort of trying to keep up with the technology, understanding it well enough so that you can invest in it in the right time. And it was the same for the LED screen, for example. It was trying to understand which version of the LED screen is worth investing the money in, that's gonna, you know, not become obsolete in 2 years, right? So you sometimes have to wait for that version that's good enough that you know that's gonna last for a bit. Whereas sometimes there's, you know, so it's really understanding the technology. And the problem with the industry is that we're in the industry, right? So we also have to actually work so that we can get paid. And we, you know, it's something that you have to do on the side of your job, so research and development, and big companies can afford to just have teams of people that are in the research and development department, and that's what they do all day. But sort of smaller to medium companies can't, because you can't just have like 6 people research and developing. The cost on the company would be too heavy. But that's, once again, I think, a problem and a solution at the same time, because in this case, virtual production helps sort of doing the research and development while you're working on projects. So you can just like try and sneak in some research and development, while you're working on something. And also it facilitates so many of the ways of the traditional filmmaking that smaller to medium company can afford it too. And the idea behind Plan V, actually, and sort of simplifying Unreal Engine, it was all part of that, wanting to democratize these tools for artists and people who are curious about it. And this is also the reason why when we put it out, it was for free, so that everyone could just download it and try it out. So it's true that it's difficult and it costs a lot to invest in the big technologies, but I think the community in general is really sharing this knowledge with open source and just discussing things amongst them, and it's like overwhelmingly nice to see how people get together in this environment, at the opposite of perhaps like the VFX industry, where it's like a fight to like who's gonna get the shots, right? And so I know I put it as a roadblock and pitfall, and then I just say one of the most exciting things, but you can once again discover and play with things, etc. But it's true that we are now in it, right? And we are now in that sort of time where things are being pushed forward. I think, as with every new technology, things will start to slow down eventually when people really figure out how to make it work good. But I still think we have a few years, so our jobs are safe. And finally, another point that I didn't put in here, which is perhaps in the industry the biggest issue, is the productions, right? Everyone's scared. Everyone's scared in general. I would say like 80% of the productions don't want to invest in it because they don't know what it is. They don't know what's the point. They don't want to understand any of it. And they don't want to spend money ahead of time, right? Which is super silly, and which is the entire point of pre-production, right? So they're okay with, they just keep pushing the problem to like the next team. So you have pre-production that pushes the problem into like the shooting, like production team, and the production team pushes the problem and the budget problems to the post-production team. And then the post-production team are just there like, we have to ask for more money to like the original. And it's just like such a silly circle that can be avoided in many of the cases. For example, by investing a tiny bit more in pre-production. And it seems pretty clear to me why, but not everyone wants to deal with it. And also another issue related to the production is the actual crew. It's the directors. Some of them, from personal experience, and I don't want to generalize with this, but this is just my personal experience, I feel the younger directors are more open to trying these things out. I just, because perhaps they're more used to, being around some sort of technologies. But there's some directors who are just like, why are you making me sit in front of this computer for like 20 minutes? And I'm like, well, because it's going to save us so much more time and money in 3 weeks. And it's like, I don't care. I just want to like have my little storyboards, and I want to arrive on set and, have my DOP with me, figure out what's the best lighting and camera angle is, and just shoot, which is great if you are Tarantino or, or Scorsese. But if you have limited budget and you're just sort of trying to figure out how to do things, it's a no-no. So I'm just gonna have some quick example. I'm aware of time, so I'm just gonna show again some few of the examples of what we did with pre-visualization and visual production. Here it's, the bear, Yorek. So it started with references, mood boards, and then we went into the concept phase and 3D development, previs, and the plan V, which is once again our old sort of like tool for visualization in Unreal Engine. That's brought these assets moving forward. And finally, the VFX turnover, as you saw in the previous video. I think actually this was the probably best example of how we used it on season 1 of His Dark Materials. It's a bit sad sometimes because I think like everyone in the industry knows you have to use like examples that are like 2 years old because when you're working on things, I probably have like a hitman right now just spying on me, making sure that I don't say anything about any NDA project. So this is a bit old, but it's not our fault. The Trollesund was a city from the show once again that we had to sort of invent. We started with research and development, trying to figure out what style we wanted to go for, and we had the concept art, which is really beautiful. I have some of those in my house because I think it just looked great. And then the initial 3D blocking out of the assets, and actually sort of creating a sort of personal kit bash, kit to use on these 3D models. And then we actually used the drone scan. So this one was the initial quarry, was completely empty. So that was just the start of the building. And for the VFX shoot, we put everything once again in the app, and you can understand that, for example, everything that's green is going to be added later on in post-production of VFX. So it was useful to understand that. It was useful to actually understand how our department was going to deal with building some of these assets. So it was, so that's already like 2 or 3 departments that are figuring their problems out thanks to this model. It was useful to the director because we could do pre-visualization and Unreal Engine Recce's. It was useful to the construction department who literally could just put a headset on. We had to move out of the headset actually because we realized that some of the people got really sick in a virtual environment. Funny enough, our technical director who literally created the thing was motion sick. So so I think, we had to, that's why we moved into having that sort of outside camera and being able to move things around. But yeah, the construction department, because it was such a massive project and they only had a few weeks to make it. So they really had to have a perfect understanding of what they were supposed to do. And this virtual production pre-visualized tool helped them to do that. And then it helped the Techvis shoot. It helped the technical handover for VFX. And this is the final scene, which results from all of these different departments using this one tool that we've made that helps pre-visualize the environments, the scenes, the assets, and getting to the final scene. And everyone's happy. So this is some of the concept art that I think looks really great. And this is the initial quarry that was just empty. There's a bit of snow. It's in the middle of Wales. It's quite rare to have snow, but yeah, you can see that we just literally had a few weeks to fill this up. And this is the start of it with the construction team. And this is little by little it coming to life. It was pretty exciting, actually, to see it happen. We also used it for understanding, for example, this one is the sun position. So where does the sun rise? Where does how does it work in terms of lighting? What time do we need to shoot this scene? What time do we make this scene happen virtually as well for the VFX teams, etc. So yeah, I'm very aware of time. So I'm just gonna perhaps jump this example, but this is once again something that we used on his dark materials. So yeah, hooray! There's no thank you in the end. That's my fault. Sorry, but thank you. Right. Are there any questions? I know I've blabbered so fast. So should I just pass the mic? Oh, maybe we have another mic.
Thank you. Yesterday I was reading an interview with the director of Norseman. It's a new blockbuster movie. And this guy was devastated that he has to film some of the scenes in Scotland instead of Iceland, because he was so thrilled on this authenticity that everything had to be real. That's a very, very different approach than what you just showed us. And I was wondering, both visions of filmmaking, how do you see that going forward in the future? Is there still place for this hyperrealism or this more virtual way of working?
Thank you. I mean, as I said, personally, I think the way forward is probably a sort of hybrid version of it. So understanding that some scenes might look better if we use sort of visual production, and understanding that some scenes might just look better if we just shoot them as we normally do, right? But it's very difficult to say because it will depend from so many things. One thing being the new generations of people who actually watch these things and what their understanding of aesthetics and visually pleasing screen results is. And that's how we, for example, have it, because it's up and down, right? So you have things moving forward. For example, you had Avatar that was super, wait, we can debate on whether it was a good movie or not, but it was super technical, right? So it was a great example of technical knowledge and skills used in VFX environment. And then you started having people who were actually, I want to shoot with a 70s camera and I want to make it really vintage again. And then we got a sort of come back to that, right? So it's a lot of back and forth. I think there won't be a point in which we just have one or the other. I think they will just always be competing with each other in a weird way, right? But for a virtual production full shoot, I think we still have a bit of time to get to a result where everyone's that's great. I mean, The Mandalorian was great because it was the first time that something like this was being tried at that level. But, there's space for improvement and new productions are picking that up. So there's a long way to go. And from now to say, oh, it's just going to be a fully virtual production shoot, I think there's still a way off. And I also think that's not going to stop classic filmmaking from happening. I just think people need to start adapting a bit. I think it was the same with Mads Mikkelsen a week ago, saying, I hate method acting, right? And people should just act. And it's the same, it's the same with filming, right? Where people should just film things as they are, or should we create things around it? But, yeah.
Thank you so much. I was really happy to see that you are using this technology to the full extent with Previs. I also have some experience with Previs myself, but my question is about planning, because you mentioned that in production, it's difficult to get everyone on board in these processes. And that's also what I notice sometimes, that it's very difficult to have the time to do all these things. So my question is, do you feel that you're allowed enough time in the planning to do all the research that you want to do with the Previs to come to the right conclusions to make it, the most efficient process?
Thank you. Are we allowed the right timing? No. Do we make it right for ourselves? We try. I mean, it's really interesting in our case as well, because we are sort of what we call each other is like a digital art department. So we're in that gap in between art department and VFX, but we work depending from the project. Sometimes it's just concept art, sometimes it's just 3D, for example. But on long-term projects such as Black Mirror or His Dark Material, we work from the very beginning with the script team before there's even an art department or VFX department in place. So we sort of follow that line. And then once the art department and VFX department are in place, we're filling that gap in between them, right? And it's really difficult because in the industry, or everyone's aware, there's like a hierarchy, like a pyramid of whose opinion is more important, and it doesn't matter if their opinion is bad. It's just because it's their title and, you know, and they're an exec or they're this or that. So it's really difficult sometimes to like sort of breathe in and try to like take that information in, but you have to make a space for yourself in that conversation, right? And I think, you know, is some people it's about the show, and what you care most about is not what credit you're gonna get at the end, is what the show is gonna look like, and that's, you know, what you are most proud of. So you have to like sort of try to find this balance in the industry between like egos and actually, well, you know, we're making a movie, so like let's make it as best as we can. But it is difficult. Like honestly, on some of the episodes, for example, it's just like you just shut down, right? Like no one wants to listen to it. Everyone's just thinking about the money, and we have to, you know, this person said this, so we have to make it like this, right? And actually what we do is, I probably shouldn't say this because it's like making free work, but pay us for our work, please. But what we do is we actually just sometimes pre-visualize the thing anyway. And then we see the director in the corridor and it was just like running with an iPad like, hey, have a look at this, you know, like, what do you think? And then sometimes we get them to engage like this. But sometimes it's literally like, no one's paying you to pre-visualize this. So, you know, like pre-visualize this other thing. And we do it anyway because, you know, Dan May just wants to show the best version to the director as possible. Chasing them around, or like they're, you know, like waiting outside the toilet like, hey, no. You know, so it's like about that passion, I think, and making that space for yourself, because in the end I think people understand that you're making it for the best reasons. So yeah.
What are the future plans for the Plan V tool? Because it was offline for like half a year ago. Now it's fine online. But what are the future plans?
Fun story behind why Plan V was offline. That was entirely my fault. But actually, we weren't told. And I mean, I don't log into the marketplace every day to like see, you know, how many people downloaded. We didn't receive an email or anything. And it was like some very silly reason that you have to like update just your tax things or whatever. And it's back. Hooray. Sorry. But we have actually big plans coming in, which is creating this Plan V suite. Which is going to have even more tools within them. First of all, improve on the current tools, but also working on other tools that we are having some issues with right now. And this is something that I've picked up with, you know, like Carlos when I came to the university here, which is there's a big problem in the UK. And I think probably, you know, like in Europe, where there's like not enough programmers or like programmers that like, you know, have like the right skills to sort of just, or interest to just jump in. And the people that do, perhaps they just want to do games. So it's like finding few people to finish those tools and adapt them. And that's what we're trying to do right now, really. But we also started making our own kits that we are started selling on the marketplace, and I think we're just gonna start like looking at on Turbo Squid and things like that, because it's part of the work that we do anyway while making the Plan V tools. We end up creating so many of these assets, and we're just like, well, it's just so silly, you know, why don't we just put them out there? Because we would have bought it if someone had done it. And so there's a part of that. But also, beside the actual softwares that we're creating, we're also thinking about, you know, starting things like this properly. And it was really funny because actually our first trial was getting a mocap suit. And I was so excited, and I ordered it online, I paid for it, and it arrived from, actually I think from the Netherlands. I think the company was based here. And I got one of the guys to suit up, and everyone was so excited. We had to send it back within like a few days because we realized that the entire studio, there was like metal everywhere. So, and no one's told us. I was so sad. So, you know, it's trying to like move a bit like more into like all of these things now and try and understand how, if we can convince some production to like get the screens or if we actually have to do it ourselves. But yeah. We good? Perfect. Well, thank you very much.